everybody. Just waiting for a few more people, so we'll get started any second. Okay, I think we will, just I say that, a couple more. Okay, I think we slowed down there, so I'll get started. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar about sharing spaces. Really excited to sort of get this webinar going and see what Robin, Matt and Sherry have to say. Before we get stuck in, just some sort of usual housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind staying on mute when the speakers are talking, just so that we can sort of avoid that background noise, that would be brilliant. But there is some sort of interaction later on in the session, so feel free to come off mute then. And we've also got a Q&A, and we sort of would like to share some experiences of other people on this call as well, related to what we're going to be talking about. We are recording today's session, so I will send that out alongside the slides after the session, so you can watch that back and share it with colleagues as well. And that's always useful for anyone that's missed it. So today's webinar is all about sharing spaces. Sorry, just let me a few more people in there. And the reason this session is happening is because Libraries Connected were invited to a workshop in London towards the end of last year, run by Think and Do Camden and Ashden, who I will pass over to shortly to explain the sharing spaces concept and why it's such a great initiative. The workshop was brilliant. It was a really well thought out workshop, loads of interaction, loads of really good ideas were sort of flying around. And it brought together a host of library staff, climate officers and other stakeholders to look at how community groups could use libraries potentially to meet and take climate action in libraries around London, but also thinking sort of wider in the future as well. We thought it would be a really good idea to share with you all of the work that Think and Do Camden, with help from Ashden, have been doing around their sharing spaces, particularly in relation to a few projects that have taken place in libraries, and hopefully inspire more of that going forwards. I will hand over to Robin, Sherry and Matt just to introduce themselves, and then Robin is going to take us through all of this great stuff.
Okay, I'll quickly introduce myself. Yeah, so I'm Robin. I work with Think and Do, which is a climate and social action charity based in Camden in London. And we have a range of different projects, but yeah, one of them, like Emma said, is sharing spaces, which I'll talk a bit more on after the introductions.
Matt, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Matt Alawalia. Hi, everyone. From climate charity Ashden. We work with local authorities, communities and schools around the UK to basically share best practice on climate action. And we try and bring people together through events and publications to fast track success and learning all around climate action. And we've been working with Think and Do to help share some of their great ideas and knowledge around sharing spaces with other groups, including Eco Show and Tell and Sherry. So I'll hand over to Sherry next.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry Asmon. Nice to meet you. I represent the Barnet, so London Borough of Barnet. I'm not from the council. I'm from an organisation called Our Home, Our Planet, CIC, under which I run Eco Show and Tell, which is all about sustainable events and all sorts of in-person knowledge sharing opportunities. I've run the sharing space in Barnet, in Finchley specifically. Nice to meet you all.
Great. Should I share my screen then and get started?
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, just bear with me. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Great. So just to quickly run through the agenda of today, I'll touch on what a sharing space is and kind of give a little overview of that. We'll look at a couple of case studies of some sharing spaces that have already taken place in libraries. We'll talk through kind of what our next steps are, what we're working on at the moment. And then these last 2 points, what are other libraries doing, and Q&A are to try and open up the floor a bit and to hear, what everyone else is working on, and if there's kind of similar initiatives that you're doing or something that you are thinking about starting or you want to get started, whatever it is, we would love to hear more about it. And then a bit of some questions at the end that we can hopefully try answer. So what is a sharing space? Quite a nebulous thing, I guess. It's not got a strict definition, but some kind of key points that will guide you along is that it's a community hub, it's free and it's open to all. It's a place where people can share ideas, they can share skills, they can share food. It's led by residents, which is really important. And like Emma said at the top, we have a strong focus on climate action. And so the first sharing spaces we ran were about 4 years ago now. We did a little pop-up on a high street in Camden. And from there, we were mainly working in tenants and residents associations, so like community halls on estates. But quite recently, we've actually started doing a lot of work within libraries. And I'm sure all of you can see the parallels there, that libraries are doing a lot of this work already. And so we think that it's quite a good fit almost to try and focus more on libraries and try and see how libraries can become sharing spaces, how they can become, community climate action hubs almost. So just to do a quick little overview through some photos. Sharing spaces are a lot to do with engaging and interacting with residents and local people and whoever wants to come down. And a lot of that is done through trying to get their ideas. So we do a lot of engagement and kind of thinking with residents, what do they want to do? What do they want to learn about? What skills could they share? I think, obviously the name sharing spaces kind of comes from that it's this place where people can, bring what they have and share with others. Food is a good example of that. I think food is kind of a universal connector and something that everyone can share around. We try and make it plant-based and try and get local residents involved in it. There's so much talent, I'm sure everyone knows this, around us and in our communities, and something like food is such a great way of people being able to share their interests and their cultures. We always kind of promote our events. We have a lot of visual material that we share. We did one at the British Library last year, kind of trying to engage young people on climate action and activism. What does that look like? So, making signs and kind of speaking out and getting your voice heard. We do lots of kind of arts and crafts activities and, making paper or making seed paper, making upcycling and using old textiles, doing natural dyes, printing, things like that. We've hosted movie nights and showing, environmental films, sustainability films, getting local organizations and businesses involved as much as possible and trying to help them connect with their local communities. Also organizing events that are around kind of more specific themes. So this was to do with food growing, specifically in Camden, so trying to get, as many people, residents, businesses, organizations who are involved in that to come and kind of network and see how we can work together. We do a lot of things outside and, greening and planting and bird boxes and bug hotels, and how to beautify your area, how do you increase biodiversity, working with kids and local artists. This was made with bottle caps, or like plastic bottle lids, to go in a school garden. Again, working with local businesses. This is a kind of a roller skating school that, you know, you'll be amazed that when you approach people or businesses, they usually have quite a lot to give. So they offered a few free lessons for kids at this sharing space, and we combined it with a clothes swap. Doing I think this was a kind of community collage, that big cardboard thing on the table, which, you know, just trying to get people to be involved and participate for 2 minutes of their time is even a win doing that. So kind of trying to find like a big range that people can get involved in. So yeah, that's a very brief overview of what sharing spaces can look like. There's quite a lot of other things that we do, but I'll stop there for sake of time, and we'll have a look at some case studies, like I mentioned. So the first one is the Finchley Church End Library, which was in Barnet and organized and facilitated by Shiri, who I'll hand over to now. Should I go to the next slide?
Thank you very much, Robin. So yeah, I was very pleased to win the funding to run a sharing space in Barnet, and I chose Finchley Church End Library as our venue. Next slide, please. So I'm from Finchley, so it was quite convenient, but still I was surprised how wonderful the library was and how fantastic it was to work there. So the first thing is absolutely the staff of the library, headed by Helen Pannell. They're just being so proactive, helping us advertise the space and the events. That meant that it brought a new and wider audience to come to our events. But the space itself is very modern, lit, clean, spacious, modular, accessible. The location is fantastic as well. We loved having all the equipment that we needed, so things like tables, chairs. I think we had 13 tables that we made use of, all of them in each of our events. The whiteboard boards, the projector, things like that, that really, really helpful for organizers like myself. My favorite bit was that we had a dedicated storage area. So there were a lot of cupboard storage space in the library, and the staff have very kindly allowed us to keep materials that we used again and again. And because we ran 12 sessions in 12 weeks, and each session was 2 hours, and each session had somewhere between 2 to 4 different workshops. You can imagine the amount of equipment needed to operate it. So I was very, very grateful to have that small cupboard area where I could keep a lot of things. We love using the kitchenette area. And just the whole place felt very secure, very safe, and very credible. The community already knows and uses the well-loved library. And it just made very much sense, and people were surprised to see how beautiful the meeting areas looks downstairs. The only difficulties was that there were a few doors that led to where we were, that required staffing. And as you know better than anyone, the staffing times have been cut, and which meant that often times we needed to sort of find someone from our team to man all these different doors. And keep us secure and safe, as well as the library. And another little thing was that the meeting area is at the basement, so there was no reception for calls. And even for Wi-Fi, we needed to use a library card. So I think that the good bit is that a lot of people signed to get a library card just so they can use the internet. Okay, next slide, please. Yes. So if you think about what is a sharing space, and as Robin said, it's quite a nebulous concept that you can sort of utilize in different ways. So in terms of the different activities that we had, It's just to give you some inspiration. I try to put them into different buckets. So the first one is Repair Cafe. And we had a few people from the community repairing things. So we had someone repairing furniture. We had an electrical engineer repairing small electrical items, and we have textile repairs. Creative workshops were really sort of like the bread and butter of the sharing space of those 12 weeks. We had lots of different things, from crocheting with plastic bags to decorating reclaimed fabrics from a local curtain factory using dye that was made from food waste, such as onion peels and etc. There was a sewing club that made sort of like a pajama for teddy bears, and fall in love with the toys that the kids already have by doing something new for those toys. Swaps. So, the first thing that people think about swaps is a fashion swap, but it doesn't have to be only fashion swap. We also did things for kids around clothes and toys. We also did a gift. So we said, do you have anything that can be a gift? And people actually loved that one especially. And just themes like kitchenware, for example. It just helped keep things quite focused. Next slide, please. We did a lot of talks as well. So, for example, we had a lady who's very passionate about Vinted, which is a secondhand fashion app that someone here is very addicted to. And she was talking about how to sell on Vinted. Again, very, very successful talk. There were so many people wanting to sell on Vinted and make money from clothes that they have while decluttering. We had a local mum who's very eco-friendly parent, so she talked about all sorts of parenting hacks. And then we invited representatives from the local community gardens and nature reserves to talk about volunteering opportunities and things like that. In terms of demonstrations, so these were not necessarily always full workshops, but local people were showing things. So, for example, how to use a cloth nappy, how to breastfeed, how to sow seeds and all sorts of gardening tips, how to make your own cleaning products, how to make your own beeswax wraps, and just a few examples. And finally, in terms of enterprise, that's a big word, but what we mean is that we did invite local artists to sell things like homemade cards made from like upcycled materials. We even have an artist that paints a natural landscape of Finchley. And so that was quite nice. And we had a local plant nursery, an organic plant nursery that sold plants. Next slide, please. And the way we did our days is that, as I said, we had 12 sessions in 12 weeks. So it was quite sort of like fast and furious. And we reached out to the community asking, can you do anything? But we sort of gave them a few ideas, which helped us then create more themed days, themed sessions, if that makes sense. So rather than every session doing everything, which is actually absolutely fine, we prefer doing one session, for example, about nature, and one session about babies and young children and young families, and one session focusing on the repair, one session focusing on home care and things like that. And then 3 sessions about cooking, one session about sustainability, fashion, and we also tried to do one session about green energy, but we couldn't get the resources that we wanted together. There are some benefits and disadvantages. The benefits is that I think it helped us bring new audiences. So, for example, for young families and babies and things like that, we could go to playgroups and toddler playgroups and things like that and said, look, this is happening, can you come? And for the nature, it helped convince the representatives from the nature reserves to come and do a talk, because they knew that their colleagues will also come, and that's a bit of a networking opportunity. So yeah, I think it worked for us. It was maybe a bit more of a logistical challenge to do it this way, but I think it was quite successful. We had no less than 40 visitors per event, and our biggest event was the nature-based one, which had about 110 or 120 visitors or something like that. Yeah, I think that's it from me. And just thank you for Ashden and Camden Think and Do for this wonderful opportunity to deliver all these workshops to our local community. We really loved it.
Great, thanks, Shiri. Yeah, I want to echo how great those sessions were. I was at quite a few, and it was lovely to see, yeah, so many people coming down. And just to plug Shiri and the work she's doing a bit more, at the bottom right there is their email address, so ecoshowandtell.org, because yeah, they're doing lots of really amazing things. So I would recommend that you see the other things they're doing.
Thank you.
Just before you move on, Robin, there was one question, Shiri. Akil was asking whether the kitchen was for staff only or public use / access.
Okay, so at Finchley Church and Library, it's a kitchenette. It's not a fully fledged working kitchen, and that was used. It's what they call a public kitchen, which means I think that when you hire, you can hire that kitchen. So we part of our hiring package included the kitchenette area, which was open to all the audiences and all the visitors. They could make themselves a cup of tea. We brought all of the teas and our own plates, and we cleaned everything at the end of each event.
Just a follow-up question from someone else there as well about, are there any hygiene certificate requirements when organising shared food events for those who handle the food? I think that's more in terms of the food, the actual events with the sharing of the food rather than the kitchen itself. Sorry, that was my misunderstanding there.
No worries.
If it's open to me, then I don't know. we didn't do anything about that. We've just had local people cook from their own kitchen and then bring it to the event.
Yeah, and in the past when for example, we have a regular sharing space in Goldington, which is an estate in Camden, and that's been going for almost 2 years now. And we've kind of got a rota of, I think, 8 local people who like to cook and are happy to help cook and provide food for people. And because they kind of became regular people, we organized food and hygiene certification for them, and that's happened in quite a few places. So I think it's something that we try and work towards, and definitely to try and make it a more sustainable thing. We definitely aim to get to that point. Should I carry on?
Yes, brilliant, thank you.
So the next one, which Matt will speak on a bit more, is one that happened in Kentish Town Library, and it was hosted by a group called Retrofit Kentish Town, sorry. And they, as the name suggests, focus on retrofitting and energy saving measures. So this was kind of a more dedicated or themed sharing space than the more general ones that you've heard about. So I'll hand over to Matt to explain a bit more about it.
Thanks very much, Robin, and thanks, Shiri. Nice to know I'm not the only one with a Vinted addiction, so that's good for me. I'll be talking about Retrofit Kentish Town sharing space. So Kentish Town is based in the borough of Camden in North London, and Retrofit Kentish Town themselves are a not-for-profit ran by about 5 to 10 volunteers in their own time. And as Robin suggested, they exist to basically try and encourage more retrofits of properties. And retrofit, for those that may not be aware, broadly just refers to making an existing building more energy efficient. So that could be anything from quick fixes like installing a LED light bulb or draft excluders, all the way up to kind of doing changing windows to make them double glazing or adding loft insulation, that kind of thing. So Retrofit Kentish Town ran a sharing space between September and Christmas last year. They ran 12 sessions on for the first part for 6 weeks, and they took a little bit of a break, and then 6 more weeks of sessions. And they rotated these sessions, some in the afternoon and some in the evening as well, to try and reach different audiences depending on what they're looking at. And these topics were broadly related to energy. So some of it related to kind of quick fixes people can do to make their home warmer today and cut their bills, like draft excluders or LED light bulbs. And then there were some sessions for more deeper changes people can make, more aimed at homeowners or landlords who might want to kind of make a more of a significant change to their property. And some of the activities were very similar to what Shiri outlined, kind of fun interactive games. So one of which was an activity where people that came in could play a game to work out which energy efficiency measures would save them the most money, and also save the most on their carbon footprint. All the way up to things such as dedicated talks by architects and trade installers about how to deliver, how to organize energy efficiency measures being done the proper way. And yeah, there were lots and lots of benefits that came out of this sharing space, and also more importantly, the kind of collaboration with the library. So what the library essentially offered was an opportunity to hold this space on the high street, on a busy high street, which is kind of well known to the community as a venue. The library did have existing users and members, which Retrofit Kentish Town were able to engage with at the start. It's warm, which helps when you're running sessions in October, November, December, particularly when you're talking about energy and trying to convince people to take energy saving measures. It helps if the place you're doing it in is not freezing. What was a real aim of this sharing space, and also sharing spaces more generally, is engaging many residents for the first time around climate change. And I think that's why you might have picked up a lot of the kind of terminology that Shiri and Robin also used were not about kind of key climate terminology. It was all about sharing or about food and that kind of thing. So because it was on the high street and it was in a trusted venue like a library, it enabled Retrofit Kentish Town to meet people for the first time who hadn't thought about energy saving measures, but may have issues like damp and cold homes and mold developing, and just kind of saw that as an isolated issue that they probably maybe can't help or were scared about engaging their landlord with, for example. And another great benefit was that the space was free to use. So Camden Council basically the libraries team discussed with Retrofit Kentish Town beforehand when the library was available to use, and they let them use it for free, which meant we gave a grant to Retrofit Kentish Town, but they were able to use more of that money on other things, whether that be kind of supporting other people to run sessions or other kind of logistical things. And the library team also allowed these sessions to run in the evening as well, which helped Retrofit Kentish Town adapt to offer different types of activities and opportunities to reach different audiences. So they had afternoon sessions, for example, in half term to make them more kid friendly. And they also had some evening sessions for adults as well. There were some difficulties that they came across, Retrofit Kentish Town. So one was that although there were kind of library members and users, the library hadn't been used before as a kind of space for the community to just drop in and engage with other things other than the kind of core library offers. So Retrofit Kentish Town did have to work with some community partners to kind of spread the word and do some engagement. So they did some door knocking and they did some social media advertising. The actual library itself was small and quite quiet, which I think is not too dissimilar to many libraries around the country. But it was definitely a different way of working for the library staff in terms of kind of having talks and kind of more open interactive sessions where people come in and utilize the library in a different way, which also brought about lots of positives. And in this case, at this library, they weren't able to serve food, which was not a major issue. However, I think Retrofit Kentish Town did feel that for some of the sessions, if food was available as a kind of binder or to kind of entice some people in who were maybe unsure about this sort of thing, that would have helped. Next slide, please, Robin. Thank you. So all the sharing spaces groups did collected lots of feedback, and I just wanted to share one or two examples of what some of the residents said. So I'll just read, I'll paraphrase. So one resident said that they've had many issues with damp and mold, and now they're more conscious of things like opening windows and how to use space at home, for example, when they're washing, and this all came from attending these sessions at the library. one person said that after attending a session, they've already engaged in actions. So they've worked with two of the participants and also with Mike, who ran the sharing space, to look at how to make their home more energy efficient. And another one, which is really nice, said that they enjoyed the sense of community that had been created at the library, and also kind of useful to help them think about how they can make their home warmer. Next slide, please, Robin. So lots of great examples of what people felt as they left the sharing space. And then just a final bit on this case study, just some points on why this was kind of successful. And so I've not got the figures on there, but over I think it was about 300 people over the period of 12 weeks came and engaged with the space. And essentially, the sharing space was an effective way of facilitating action. So it wasn't just on Mike, who ran Retrofit Kentish Town, to do everything, and it wasn't just on the library officer, who was quite new to this as well. It was the library formed a facilitative space where local experts or other volunteers or groups could attend for the first couple of weeks and then learn and then speak themselves at the session or run activities. So it was a binder of other things that were already happening in the region. One other thing that was successful, so when it comes to energy saving, lots of things like LED light bulbs or draft excluders can be given away for free by councils, but or community groups, but this can often raise suspicion. So I don't know if anyone has ever tried this, but if you try and give someone something for free out on the street or an event, people are often surprised because it feels like this should be a catch. And actually handing out LED light bulbs to people at the library sort of boosted the trust. So people were able to think, well, this is at the library, I sort of broadly trust what goes on here. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of take this LED light bulb and listen to what the person has to say. Another reason why this was a great successful program was that attendees were given something to walk away with, like something tangible. So whether that was a free light bulb, so 75 light bulbs were handed out in the first fortnight, or a connection to a trusted local installer. So one thing people often struggle with when doing retrofit is there's often very little advice on how to actually get going and who's a qualified person, who's a trusted local person who can actually install insulation, for example. And this space facilitated conversations in a nice trusted setting for people to meet local traders or installers who could help them deliver work. And finally, there was a real strong alignment between the Retrofit Kentish Town sharing space and Camden Council's climate and fuel poverty programs. So Camden Council themselves and their climate team really supported Retrofit Kentish Town to basically embed this kind of project into the pre-existing council climate initiatives. Camden Council also work on fuel poverty, and they were able to support this project and use this kind of sharing space to reach people in the community who are often not reached at all when it comes to things like fuel poverty and other measures. So it was a great opportunity for the local authority and people from different departments to link up with a community group in a trusted space. And that has led to kind of more working as a result since the sharing space ended in December. Next slide, please, Robin. I think this is my final slide. Just bearing in mind those two case studies and I guess the broader sharing space work that we had, I just wanted to touch on the overall alignment, I guess, of sharing spaces to local authorities. So most on the call will be aware, and most local authorities have a council climate action plan or strategy. This will broadly set out the way in which the local authorities will look to reduce the carbon footprint, both of their own estates, so their own buildings, their own cars and transport initiatives, but also how they can influence local communities to reduce their carbon emissions and also create kind of additional co-benefits. And the sharing spaces align really neatly to this. They talk about climate action and they overall serve to reduce the carbon footprint of a local region, but it's not in a way that is kind of forcing it on local residents. It's very interactive and empowering and gives residents opportunities to relate to climate action in a way that is kind of understandable and interesting and useful to them. And in that way helps local authority engagement projects as well. So I've sort of touched on that second point there, but a third opportunity of how this relates to local authorities, and I sort of talked about it with the Retrofit Kentish Town example, but sharing spaces are a great opportunity to bring together different council departments who otherwise may work in silos. So, for example, at many sharing spaces ran last year, local authorities had officers from their air quality teams or community cohesion who would attend different sharing spaces and kind of bring a different offering. So in Camden, for example, in each sharing space that ran, the air quality officer would come and kind of do a pop-up kind of interactive engagement activity, talking to people about indoor air pollution from things like candles or heaters. And it was a great way for different parts of the councils to really come together, as I said, and tackle similar core issues like climate action, but also other social issues as well. And finally, we found that sharing spaces are a great way to essentially invite the community in. So to encourage residents and local groups to build new relationships with the council. Everyone, I'm sure, are aware on the call some of the kind of mostly unfair criticism that people have of their council, often just related to the bins and how things like that are collected, which seems to tarnish council reputations on everything, which is really unfair. So sharing spaces we've seen is a great way of councils building new relationships and opportunities with their residents in a way that is understandable and suitable to residents, whilst giving them something there to take home. So yeah, I think that's me done, Robin. I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thanks, Matt. So that was, yeah, a quick overview, I guess, of a couple of sharing spaces that we've already run and kind of their experiences of it. So this next bit is, yeah, kind of what we're working on at the moment and what we're trying to work towards. And the first thing is that we are starting up a sharing space in Queen's Crescent Library, which is in Camden. And this kind of came off the back of that workshop that Emma mentioned at the beginning, which we had in late last year. And we were speaking with Camden libraries and, yeah, kind of seeing how we could kind of pilot something in one of the Camden libraries. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of planning all of it, but I'll try to do a quick run through of where we're at the moment. So we are essentially doing a 10-week program that is split up into two halves almost, with a break in between. So currently we're planning block 1, and what that looks like is essentially answering these questions, these kind of key questions. So what is already happening in the library and who can we collaborate with? So I think this is important to kind of outline that, you know, the work that we're doing here and what we've shown you isn't reinventing the wheel, and we definitely don't want to be doing that. So I'm sure a lot of you are working on things that we've kind of spoken about throughout this, and you know, there's amazing organizations and groups and individuals that are doing this kind of work all over the country, really. So I think the first step in setting up these sharing spaces is trying to identify what is already happening in the local area, who is doing this kind of work, and how do we almost act as a networking system to bring these communities together, or these groups together. How do they reach new audiences, and how do we amplify the work they're already doing? That third point, what outcomes are we trying to achieve, I think is important, because as we've said, you know, sharing spaces are quite different, and they can take many different shapes. And I think it's really important to understand kind of the local contexts you're working within and what it is you're trying to get out of this almost. So is it to look at a specific issue like retrofitting that many people don't understand, or is it to try and get more children into libraries, or is it to act as a enabling system for people to start doing other things? So we've actually found that our sharing spaces have acted as kind of incubators almost. And when we spoke about food and hygiene safety a bit earlier, actually kind of from that group of residents who did that training, they went on to start a business called Sharing Eats, and then a cafe, which is based in Somerstown, Camden. And so it's kind of, how do you identify what, you know, skills or passions these residents have, and how can we enable them to take that further? And then those last 2 points are really crucial in all of this. You know, what is the role of the library staff, and how do we make this project sustainable in the long term? So we're very aware that, you know, there's budget cuts to libraries happening across the country, and library staff are stretched, and a lot of libraries are community run. And I think a big part of this work is making sure that what we're trying to do, or how we're trying to set this up, is not adding onto an already overloaded plate for library officers and library staff. And so we're working really closely with the Queen's Crescent staff to you know, see what role they can and want to play in all of this, and how do we make it sustainable in the long term. So we can definitely go in and run a 5-week sharing space that's really successful and loads of people come down, but how do we prevent it from, at the end of that 5 weeks, it kind of dying out? How do we make sure that it continues in some guise? And so to kind of elaborate a bit more on what these blocks look like I said, block 1 is trying to piece together what's already happening there, bringing people into the space, and understanding what residents want first and foremost. So I think I spoke about this at the beginning, but that kind of looks like something we do is putting up, you know, what if walls, and having different themes and sections that residents can feed their ideas into. We find a lot of the time residents don't really have that opportunity, or local people or participants don't really have that opportunity to say what it is they want to do, or what they want to learn about, or what they can share, you know, what skills they have that they think would be fun to share with others. And so trying to create a space that gives them an opportunity to do that. And this is really important to start building that relationship between people using the library and the library itself. And how do we try and instill some sort of autonomy or ownership for them of this space? How do they feel like they can come in here and do what they want to do? And I think this also has a lot to do with how we can ensure sort of longevity of the project. You know, if all of this work is reliant on library officers or library staff, then it kind of dies out very quickly because they have so much on. But if residents are taking up the mantle, so to speak, then it's something that can be sustained more in the long term. So all of these ideas that we're getting from residents are going to feed into what, you know, block 2 looks like. So block 1 almost acts as a way of bringing them in, allowing them to become familiar with the space, sharing their ideas, and that creates space for them to co-design workshops, you know, allows them to sign up to host different things that they want to teach or learn about. You can quickly get together groups that have similar ideas. You know, if people want to, I don't know, knitting's always a good example, but sometimes people just don't have a space to do these things. You know, lots of people have ideas, but the lack of access to space is a big barrier. And so how do we kind of enable them to overcome that? So at the end of that first block, we'll have a break, and this is quite important to kind of be able to reflect on, you know, the work that we've already done in block 1. What did we think went well? What didn't work? It also acts as a chance to do a knowledge and skills handover. So by this, I mean we're going to invite other library officers from around Camden, and actually this is also an open invite to everyone on the call, really, that like I said, we don't have the full details yet, but as soon as there's kind of dates in the diary, I'll be sure to send out to anyone that's interested. But we would love it to be a kind of open network and an open way to share what we've learned and what we found difficult, or what worked and what didn't. And all of this is then going to feed into what block 2 looks like. And this, if all goes well, will very much be a resident-led space. So that's kind of the key takeaway through all of this, is how do we create that autonomy in residents to facilitate and to host these workshops. And will also act as kind of a learning hub for other libraries to come and see how this is done and what they can take away to their own libraries. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at the moment. And like I said, we'll be sure to update everyone who's interested on how this develops and how you can get involved. The other thing that we have going is a steering group, which was formed again off the back of that workshop that we did at the end of last year. And so this currently has quite a few people from councils to community organizations. We've got library teams in there, sustainability teams. And basically this is to look at how can we roll out sharing spaces a bit more widely. What are the barriers that libraries are facing, preventing them from doing this kind of work? Are there any groups that are wanting to do this, or have been planning it for a while, and what's kind of the sticking points? How do we get funding for these kind of things? So that's currently ongoing, and it's kind of a meeting every second month or so online that we're doing. And yeah, there's an email there for Matt. If you'd like to join this, we'll also share this a bit later. But yeah, we are welcoming everyone that would like to join, and it's been great to kind of hear what other council departments and organizations are working on so far. So it's really helping to kind of inform the work that we're doing going forward. The last thing I'll speak about, I think, and before I open it up to the group, is we've also got a toolkit. So this is one that we wrote last year. So basically a how-to guide, for community groups to get up and running with a sharing space, and it covers everything from engagement to branding to working with your local council, budgeting, things like that. So we're doing a revised version at the moment, and we're also doing a kind of addendum to that's specifically for libraries, so kind of sharing spaces in libraries. And what does that look like as a kind of unique part of this work? We will hopefully be done with that in the next month or so, and we'll be sharing it at an Ashden event, which I don't think Matt has details for yet, but again, something that we can definitely share to people who are interested in attending that. I don't know if you want to speak on anything about that, Matt. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Other than it'll probably just an event probably happening online in May, but we can share more details with that when we have it, and I can share it with Emma, for example, and take it from there. Thanks.
Great, cool. I think that brings us to the end of kind of the presentation part of it. So I don't know how much time we have left. Only about 10 minutes. So I guess we would love to hear kind of what other groups are working on, or for similar things are happening in your areas, your communities, or if they're not happening, why is that the case, and what are the barriers, and do you want to be trying to do work like this? So I think I'll stop sharing just because I can't see anyone. And yeah, hand it back to you, Emma, to facilitate.
Brilliant. It looks like Akil has something to say, so feel free, Akil.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Robin. It's been a really fascinating morning, actually, and it's certainly got me going, and of course, Shiri as well. It's been really interesting. And I should introduce myself. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Learning in Libraries over at Islington, and we've got a really good kind of, maybe seen as a kind of traditional type library setup. We've got loads of activities like baby bounce in our children's libraries and the other spaces. I think one of the areas that we'd be looking to develop, which has really shone through for me, is the resident engagement and the fact that it's empowering residents to do a lot of this stuff themselves, and also the capturing of the resident voice in terms of what they want and what they could bring. And I really like the idea of the what if wall. Were there any other instruments that you use to gauge resident feedback other than the what if wall? Because really what we want to do is kind of develop an approach where that relationship is a bit more kind of grassroots and a bit more sort of resident, where the residents are producing stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That sounds really great. I think, I mean, yeah. So as a short answer, we have quite a few different things that we use, and I think we're actually going to be setting up Queen's Crescent Library in the next few weeks and can share kind of pictures and resources of what that will look like. But in short, the What If Wall is great to kind of get conversations going. We've also done something in the past where people have kind of little name tags, and it's, this is my name and these are the skills I have, or this is what I'd like to share. We do things around, I guess, kind of categories or themes. So in like nature or greening, people will write down what they're interested in. And you'll find a lot of the time that there's a lot of overlap. People are interested in growing herbs, for example, and that can act as a really nice way to then start building kind of community groups from these residents, and almost, acting as kind of like a Cupid, so to speak, to say that, oh, you're interested in this and you're also interested in this, why don't you to host a workshop together? I think something that people find intimidating when they, haven't been involved in this kind of work before is the idea of hosting a workshop is a really big step up, and they've never done something like that before. But when you say, oh, but there's 4 other people who are interested and maybe you can all do it together, that already kind of eases those nerves. And also, a large part of this work is trying to increase social cohesion in communities, and that's kind of one step in doing that. We've got loads of tools that we've used. I can kind of share them more with you after this. But yeah, I think like the community engagement part is probably the biggest part of the work that we try and focus on. So yeah, I'll happily share more of that with you.
Brilliant, thank you. Amy Marriott.
Hi, thank you, and thanks for this morning. It's been really, really interesting. I definitely want to learn more. Introduce myself. I'm the area librarian from Warwickshire County Council, and we are super interested in developing more of a community offer. We get lots of asks all the time, lots of people interested in hosting things in our libraries, which is lovely. But we're basically not doing it at the moment because we have concerns. We don't have any processes or procedures in place to mitigate foreseen risks. So risks like, if somebody is hosting something in the library, are they delivering something that's a quality session? How are they handling people's data? How do you ensure that it's not a random that's trying to sort of access the community, safety-wise? Other things like, do they have commercial interests? Are you just allowing people to volunteer, but are they actually, trying to set something up for their own personal gain? So I just wondered, it might be a bit of a too big a question, and perhaps I'll join the steering group, but I wondered if you could give an overview of what mitigations you've put in place to host things in the library. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. We definitely do have things in place, but I would say for the most part, people are like, I guess we try to be almost naive in the sense that usually people are just happy to kind of get involved in their community, and there usually isn't nefarious intentions, I guess. But I definitely understand the apprehension, and I would say in terms of kind of safeguarding, it's good to have kind of, someone would be responsible for that space, safeguarding officer or health and safety, someone from the library. I think, especially if it's someone who's hosting something for the first time, you wouldn't leave them alone in the space with other residents. And then in terms of like health and safety, doing a risk assessment is always good. And I think for the workshop itself, like the content of it, I can again share something with you, or you can kind of like draft your own thing, but it's basically an easy way of kind of going through what the workshop would look like with that person who wants to host. So, you know, what is it you want to do? What materials are required? Why do you want to do this? What are the kind of outcomes? How are you making sure that everyone's involved in it and can participate regardless of their age or their ability? And if you're kind of trying to make it an environmental focus, you know, how is this sustainable, or how can we make it more sustainable? And I think, you know, obviously this requires a library staff or someone to kind of take the time to go through it with them. But I think by kind of just talking over the idea with someone, or maybe even doing kind of a practice run with them, you know, what would this workshop look like? How would you set up the space? Very quickly allows you to see, you know, what it is they want to do. Yeah, I'll pass over to Matt. If you want to say.
Yeah, I think that's great, Robin. Just to say, so when we handed out kind of grants to run sharing spaces, we also, so some groups didn't need them, but we also created kind of set out safeguarding policies and things over GDPR and working with children and public liability, that kind of thing, to kind of provide to community groups or people running sessions, just so they're kind of aware of that. It wasn't like an upskilling or training, I wouldn't say, but we kind of created this for them. And as Robin said, so we have a sharing spaces toolkit, but we're in the process of converting that into a smaller kind of library specific manual or tool. So I think that's definitely something we can outline in as a sub chapter. And maybe Amy, I could send you an email just to check that we'd be covering the right kind of things so that it'd be kind of be useful to libraries across the country.
That would be amazing. That'd be really, yeah, really appreciate just to understand your learning. That'd be great. Thank you.
There was a question that came up in the chat a little while ago that I don't want to forget. So Kate from Leeds has asked if any of the speakers that worked in libraries after hours, were there any requirements for library staff or security staff to be present? I know, Shira, you mentioned, I don't know if it was out of hours when you were in there, but you mentioned that you had staff on the doors, because was that for sort of passes? Was that because you couldn't get through without a pass?
Yeah, exactly. We were operating after hours, so that part was a bit tricky for us, because we did make use of the security staff, and always asked him if he sees anyone waiting for, you know, to enter, to just let them in, and direct them in our way and things like that. But it wasn't always done, because obviously that the security person have a lot of other areas to cover. It's they're not there working for me. So that was always a challenge, you know. We always had some volunteers trying to do that where we could.
Thank you. Any other experiences from you, Matt or Robin?
Yeah, for the Kentish Town one, Mike, so he's the one who from Retrofit Kentish Town. I think the library staff were just really accommodating and up for helping out with this. You know, I think the fact that it was kind of a limited run also helped, because, sorry, my phone is going off. It didn't mean it was like an indefinite amount of time that they would have to stay and lock up kind of thing. But there was a library staff who, I think the library there closes at 6 usually, and so it was kind of staying open for an extra hour. And basically the Retrofit Kentish Town did all the clear up at the end of the session, and kind of locked there was one library staff there who made sure that everything was locked up. So I guess it depends on whether people would want to stay late, but I think there's also you know, something to look into of if you've got a trusted organization like Retrofit Kentish Town who are working there for the long term, like can they go through like a, what's the word? Not initiation, but like a induction on how to open and close the space, so that they have more autonomy over it, and it's not reliant on library staff. Again, I think a big thing of all of this work is you know, how do you make lives easier for library staff rather than adding to their plate.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We are out of time. That has been such a good webinar. Thank you very much for everyone that's sort of gotten engaged there, and particularly to Matt, Robin and Shiri. And there's some really nice comments as well about all sorts of things that are going on, which I will make sure I collate and bring to sort of maybe the steering group, etc., to talk about that. So in terms of next steps, I'll send an email out with the email addresses of people that have shown an interest in being part of the steering group. If you'd like to join that as well, or you're interested, it's sort of not a complete commitment now. Just drop me your email and we can pass that on as well. It's a really good group of people, really sort of innovative, keen, passionate as well. So there's lots going on there. I will send out the slides and a follow-up email with the recording as well. But just thank you so much to Matt, Robin, Shiri, and all of you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Hopefully see you, in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you.
Great webinar. Thank you.